That's awesome. We can applaud that, yeah? Someone telling you about changing their life, that's pretty cool. Hey, Lincoln Heights, it's great to be back with you. Those of you watching, listening online, so glad that you guys are a part of this as well. We are wrapping things up today in this series we've been in, and I just wanted to begin and just let you know I had an incredible week. This is just one of those like, whoa, I'm going to have to process this for a while. In fact, to be honest with you, I'm thawing out from this week. My wife and I got the chance to go to Alaska this week, and she has wanted to see the Northern Lights for many years. And so we finally had the ability to go up there and try it. And I don't know if you know what it's like to try to see the Northern Lights, but you have to be in cold places, right, to get that to work. And it was so cold in Alaska this week. In fact, it was never above freezing the entire time we were there. In addition to that, for like only a few hours was it ever in the positive degrees. So we were in the negatives almost the entire trip. In the evenings, when we would go out to go look at the Northern Lights in the middle of the night, right? Because you have to do that in the middle of the night. It was negative 20 below. Like, we're talking a cold that I've never experienced in my life, right? And I had bought like these nice Columbia winter boots. Like, I'm ready for it. First night, I'm like, these are not going to cut it. And someone's like, yeah, you have to, when it's this cold, you have to get like negative 50 degrees rating on your boots. Otherwise, they're not going to withstand that. So that day, we were like, because we knew we were going back out, I'm like, look, I'm going to go find the most aggressive shoes they make. Literally went to like a store there, and I'm like, what's the highest rated shoes? And they're like, well, these ones are negative 90 degrees. I'm like, I'll take them. I don't know where I'll ever experience negative 90 degrees in my life, but I'll tell you what, that next night, my feet felt amazing. I mean, warm as pillows. It was awesome. I did something I've never done before. And some of you, if you have lived in a very cold state, maybe you're familiar with this. I'm an Arizona guy, never experienced this. I had to plug my vehicle in, my rental car in, at night. It was not an electric car. So you're going, why are you plugging it in? If you don't plug your vehicle in, your engine freezes overnight, and you don't drive it the next day. Like, you're done. And so you'd park it when it's that cold. There's this cable coming out of your engine, and you plug it in to keep your vehicle from freezing overnight. I'm like, this is the wildest experience. I've never experienced cold like that. But all of it was to be able to see this. That is a photo of one of the nights we were there. We're actually, it's hard to see, but like we're on the deck of this little cabin watching this. And I got to tell you, we were with, some of our family, and they don't all believe the same things we do. And we were having kind of conversations afterward, and I was like, that was a spiritual moment. Like, I don't know how you watch that. And one of them's like, no, I think it's amazing about science. And I'm like, okay, different ways of understanding it. But for me, I would just say, like, I understand the science behind it. I also thought, like, whoa, God, like, that's just cool. And literally, as I was watching these lights dance in the sky in front of me, thinking, this doesn't even look real, if I wasn't seeing it for myself, I just was like, thank you, Jesus. And so I just wanted to share that with you. Like, there's some pretty cool things out there that I got to see for the first time, and it just reminded me our God is incredible, and we're going to talk about the same person that I believe made that. We're going to talk about that today. So today we're concluding this series, Brothers, Managers, and Dead People. If you got your Bibles, we're going to be in Luke chapter 16. We're looking at 3 stories that appear together in the end of 15, and then 2 stories in chapter 16. Each of these stories involves what we do with what we have. And we're looking at these 3 stories together, seeing how there's some common themes that Luke is developing them. Now, hopefully, if you've been with us the last few weeks, you've heard me explain how we're not as logical as we think we are when it comes to how we manage our stuff. And we have all these things that we do that are kind of silly when you look at them. And we've kind of played some games the last few weeks to illustrate that. But there's a quote that I came across from Jerry Seinfeld. And this just makes me laugh. And it illustrates that even when we want to like pat ourselves on the back, like we are so advanced as humans, there's just things that we do that you go, yeah, that is kind of silly when you look at it. Here's something that Jerry Seinfeld said. He said, there are many things that we can point to that prove that the human being is not smart. The helmet is my personal favorite. The fact that we had to invent the helmet. Now, why did we invent the helmet? Well, because we were participating in many activities that were cracking our heads. We looked at the situation, we chose not to avoid these activities, but to just make little plastic hats so that we can continue our head-cracking lifestyles. The only thing dumber than the helmet is the helmet law. The point of which, this is so funny, is to protect a brain that is functioning so poorly, it's not even trying to stop the cracking of the head that it's in, right? I love that idea. Like when you look at some of the things, you go, yeah, that is kind of silly. Like, why do we do these things? And we go, yeah, it's totally normal. But a lot of these things are a bit interesting. So today, we're going to see another common thing that we do as we look at a story that Jesus is going to tell. And if you're anything like me, go, oh, yeah, I can relate with that. I do that too. And we're going to see why we tend to do this. So if you're in Luke 16, we're going to begin reading. The story begins in verse 19. Jesus said, "There was a certain rich man who was splendidly clothed in purple and fine linen, and who lived each day in luxury." Now, these are great details, but remember, all of these stories we looked at this series are made-up stories. Jesus is making these up, right? But this one's got so many interesting details in it. At his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. Now, fun fact here, you're going to have these two people, contrasted. Which one of them has a name? The poor man. We don't even know the rich man's name, right? So the rich man is going to be portrayed in a certain way. We only humanize the poor man. The rich man's kind of like this figure. As Lazarus, the poor man, lay there longing for scraps from the rich man's table, the dogs would come and lick his open sores. This is masterful storytelling. You can immediately empathize with this guy. Finally, verse 22, the poor man died and was carried by the angels to sit beside Abraham at the heavenly banquet. The rich man also died and was buried. Okay, so here we have a story about two dead people, right? That's how we got the title for today, Brothers, Managers, and Dead People. We got two dead guys. Now, I'm going to say right up front, if you're going to, hey, where are we going with this story? Just give you my take on this, and you can take the story wherever you want to take it. My take is this story is not about heaven and hell, okay? We often read this story like that, and if you were to isolate this story outside of the other two stories we've just read, you might go, oh, Jesus is teaching us about heaven and hell. I personally do not think that's the point of this story. I think the point of this story is the same as the two stories that came before it. So these are all three stories that are connected in the same way of mismanaging what you have. And so I'm going to invite you to see the story from that point of view. Now, this is, again, is a made-up story. These are names and details, but these are all stories that Jesus made up. But notice, it's about someone who has a lot and someone who has nothing, right? This is the same type of thing that we've been in the last few weeks. Now, the theologian Miguel de la Torre says this: although the message of life after death is important, the real message that the vast majority of those living in oppression hunger for is life prior to death. So we have this tendency when we see a story like this and go, oh, it's about heaven and it's about hell. And we make it this like abstract, nebulous thing, like when you die, here's some things to consider. What I would like to do is go, this affects how we live long before we die. So if all you get out of this story is like, this is something that happens when you die, I think you're going to miss the point of the story of what Jesus is trying to help us realize of you have a choice right now. You have time right now while you're not dead, while you're not, in the grave. You have a chance to figure out how you want to live. And this story gives us a contrast. So we have the beggar, we have a rich man. The beggar, Lazarus, his life is dominated by suffering. And then you have this unnamed rich man, and I would say his life is defined by a sense of numbness, right? He has everything, but he's apathetic. He sees needs around him, and he feels nothing. He doesn't see it. He doesn't do anything about it. He just has everything he wants. I would describe that as being numb. He has the power to change the situation for Lazarus, but he doesn't do it. It has no desire to do that. But then in Jesus' story, death is going to reverse the situation for both of them. Now again, don't just go, oh, this is heaven and hell. Think about this as a storytelling technique. You have these two contrasts, a rich man, a poor man. When they die, their roles are reversed. Okay, so now all of a sudden, the plot has been twisted, and you go, wow, this is cool what Jesus is doing here. Go to verse 23. It says, and the rich man went to the place of the dead. There in torment, he saw Abraham. In the far distance was Lazarus at his side. Now again, I don't think any of this is literally Jesus trying to teach you how the afterlife works, okay? This is a story. He's bringing in all sorts of characters and names and things, trying to make a point. The rich man shouted, Father Abraham, have some pity. Send Lazarus over here to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. I am in anguish in these flames. But Abraham said to him, Son, remember that during your lifetime, you had everything you wanted, and Lazarus had nothing. So now he is here being comforted, and you are in anguish. Roles have been reversed. And besides, there's a great chasm separating us. No one can cross over to you from here, and no one can cross over to us from there. Here's what I find so fascinating in this story. Notice that the rich man still expects Lazarus to serve him. Hey, Abraham, send Lazarus to dip his finger in water and come and serve me. That this rich man, even in death, still has this sense of entitlement of, you should do this for me. Hey, Lazarus, you should be doing this to comfort me. That even in death, his mindset of entitlement has not changed. See, death has reversed their situation, but it has not reversed his perspective. And friends, I would suggest this is what unchecked privilege will do to you. It will distort reality, where even when things change, you can't see what's in front of you because you're just operating on a delusional level. And so here we have this rich man that even in death is expecting, hey, you owe me something. You better serve me. And Abraham's like, what are you talking about? Like, that is not how this is going to work. Now, this is probably the first moment of accountability that this rich man has experienced. He has had success after success and all the things in his life, and it has turned him into a person who does not care for the suffering of those around him. And then now in this afterlife moment, this story that Jesus creates, now there's a sense of accountability. Okay, now there's some checks and balances here to how you spent your life, and he doesn't like it. Now, possibly, the only thing we like talking about less than we like talking about money is accountability, right? That is like not a fun topic. No one wants to talk about it, but we've seen that theme throughout these stories, right? This sense of, remember last week if you were with us, that the manager was doing whatever he wanted till the owner came in and said, hey, you have to give an account, right? Same theme that we're seeing of, hey, you can go live your life, you can do whatever you want, but there will be a moment where there's gonna be a sense of accountability of what are you doing with what you have. And we see that theme throughout these stories. Now, I don't know what accountability you have in your life. I remember, early on when I would get into ministry and I would preach in front of people and, I would get accolades. People, that was a great sermon, Pastor. And then some people would be like, I hope this doesn't go to your head. I hope our encouragement's not going to distort you. And my joke was always, if you knew my wife, you wouldn't be worried about that. Because my wife is a truth teller. Now, I don't mean to say that she's like harsh on me by any means. She's just not going to flatter me and let me have a big head about something that isn't real. And so I could get all sorts of accolades, and then I'd get in the car, and my wife would be like, not your best. She would just bring me back down like, hey, that one point, that story was confusing, whatever. And just has a way of keeping me grounded, and I'm forever grateful for that. But she also just does funny things that just always keep me in touch with reality. Like one of the things that she likes to do, and I don't know if any of you have this, but we've had those video doorbells for a while. My wife likes to let me know that she's aware that I watch our video doorbell, and from time to time, she'll do things in front of the doorbell that I'll just pick up and I'll be like, okay, that's funny, or that's amusing or whatever. Like, she just is often doing things in front of the doorbell that then I'll see later. I'm like, that's funny. One day, I found this one, and this one like scared me a little bit, but this is what I found on my doorbell video. Yeah, that was it. Just my wife letting me know, hey, I see you. I know you're there. That just cracked me up. And so I love that just a reminder of like, yeah, we have these sense of accountability, and my wife is always watching as the doorbell cam reminds me. But here you have a sense of accountability that this man is dealing with for the very first time. It reminds me of what Walter Brueggemann has said. He says, we are driven to the ultimate consumerism of consuming each other. See, oftentimes when we think like, I know I'm not hurting anyone, I'm just doing what I want. What we can fail to realize when there's no sense of accountability, when there's no sense of reality, is that if you keep getting and getting and getting, it always comes at the expense of someone else. So in Jesus' story, he's letting you know, hey, the reason there is a rich man is because there's a poor man. You have one and you have the other. And oftentimes we go, no, I can just have and have and have and have. And we fail to realize the connection. See, this is what I would think Jesus wants you to realize. If you have this kind of a guy, look around you, there's going to be this kind of a guy. Right? If you have this rich man that has everything and all this, all the pomp and circumstance, there's going to be someone else suffering nearby. Because that's how the system works. And this makes us uncomfortable. But this is the story that Jesus is telling. Hey, you have both of these people. And what does this dynamic between the two of them mean? See, if you allow the stuff that you have to shape your identity, you will lose touch with reality. If you allow the things that you have acquired, you will start to see the world in a false version, right? You won't see the world the way Jesus sees it. Now, let me give you a few examples of how this might play out. Have you allowed your job position to define or shape your identity? Now, we might be quick to go, no, that's just what I do. But imagine if you no longer did what you do, right? So you are a fill in the blank, and maybe some of you have been in a career for a long time. This is who I am. This is what I do. And if you've risen through the ranks of that role, right, you might have a sense of like pride in that, of like, I've worked hard to get here. Has that shaped your identity? Because that's not who you are. That's what you do. But there's this tendency we have to, no, that's part of who I am. And we can define ourselves. We can find our identity in the job that we have. Or connected to that, have you allowed your salary to shape you, to shape your identity? Well, I'm worth this amount. That's the kind of person I am. I bring in this kind of income. You see how that creeps in, that idea of like, no, this is kind of like my worth. Like I'm worth this amount, and that's what people pay me. And you start to realize you're shaping your identity off of this. How have you allowed your school to define you? Now, some of you, if you're in school right now, you're like, yeah, look at the school that I attend. Like this is who I am. Or maybe you're eyeing a school you want to go to. Like, hey, someday that will be the school I'll graduate from. Or if you have graduated, you look back, I'm an alumni of this university. You notice how we can let something as silly as a school define who we are. That's the kind of person I am. I go to that school. That's who I am. Again, just these abstract things. Maybe you've allowed the vehicle you drive to shape your identity. This is a common one, right? Like you pull up, you're like, yeah, I'm the kind of person that drives that. That's who I am. Something as fleeting as a vehicle, and oftentimes these vehicles aren't even paid off. We owe massive amounts on them. But we love how we feel when we pull up and when people see that big, huge truck or they see that fast car. We go, yeah, I'm the kind of person that drives that. And you can easily let that shape who you see yourself or the house you live in, right? This is another one. Oh, look how big This house, look what I have in my house. That's the kind of person I am. These are just common ways, and we all struggle with this. But you can let any of these things begin to shape who you see yourself to be. And if that happens, you are the rich person in this story. And we all can relate with that. Go, oh yeah. Because that creates a false reality. You are not any of these things. And these things do not actually shape who you are, but it feels like that. And the world makes you think, yeah, because you drive that car, because you live there, because you attended that school, because your job is that, any of these things can make us feel a certain way. Go to verse 27. Then the rich man said, please, Father Abraham, at least send Lazarus to my father's home, for I have 5 brothers, and I want him to warn them so they don't end up in this place of torment. But Abraham said, Moses and the prophets have warned them. Your brothers can read what they wrote. The rich man replied, no, Father Abraham. But if someone is sent to them from the dead, then they will repent of their sins and turn to God. But Abraham said, if they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't be persuaded, even if someone rises from the dead. A little wink of foreshadowing from Jesus there. Now, again, notice, the rich man still thinks Lazarus owes him something. Okay, if Lazarus won't help me, send Lazarus to my family. I mean, the sense of entitlement in this story is amazing. Hey, Lazarus should be doing something for me. At least send him over to my family. This rich man thinks that his situation lasts indefinitely. Hey, I always have the status that I've had in life. It is going to continue even in death. And the joke is on him in this story because he does not realize how the role has been reversed. See, a lot of times we struggle the same way to acknowledge an ending in our life. This rich man is numb to the fact that his situation has ended. It has come to an end. It is no longer the reality, but he just can't accept that. And you and I sometimes struggle with endings too because it forces us to grapple with our own limitations. Now, God is infinite. So God can embrace endings and beginnings because God will be around for all of them. You and I are not. So when it comes to endings, you and I get real squirrely around embracing an ending of something because it's a reminder of our limitation. It's a reminder that we may not be around for a new beginning after this ending. In fact, all of us temporally will come to an end. And we go, I'm not sure about that. I'm not ready to embrace that yet. Because there will be a new beginning, but we won't be around for it. And yet God is the constant in all this. God is in every ending and every new beginning. And you and I often struggle, which is why we say things that make us feel better, but they reveal a hesitation against an ending. Notice some of the sayings that we say. I'll always be there for you. Again, it's so common, you go, yeah, well, of course. But think about that idea. That's a promise no one can fulfill. I'll always be there for you. How on earth would we know that we could pull that off? The vast majority of us will break that promise if we make it to someone. You'll always be there for them. What if you die first? You won't be there for him then. Right? I mean, just something as simple as that. And yet, no, come on, that's romantic to say. Like that's just what you do. And I would just suggest that is revealing to us that we don't like the idea of acknowledging I may not be able to be there for you. That's a very vulnerable thing to acknowledge. Or we say, I'll make it up to you. Hey, I know this is bad, but I'm going to make it up to you. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe there's no chance this side of heaven you could make it up to someone. But we don't like acknowledging that. No, I'm gonna make it up to you. I'm just gonna boldly make that promise to you. Or I'll do that when, and we just kind of feel, hey, I'll do that when this happens. Not acknowledging maybe that trigger that we're waiting for will never happen. And so we don't know if we're gonna do these things that we promise to do. These are just common expressions we use, but they reveal the same thinking that we see in this rich man. The sense of this will always go on the way it is right now. And I'm not going to acknowledge any limitation. We have all the time we will ever need. And here's one of the points of this story as I see it. If the resurrection of Jesus cannot move you to generosity, nothing will. See, this rich man's like, well, have Lazarus do this for me. Okay, you won't do that. Well, have him go to my family. There's just all these other things that have to keep happening. Well, yeah, but if someone, from the dead came to him, and then Jesus is like, even if someone rose from the dead, that wouldn't convince you. Acknowledging, I'm about to do just that. And so we can go, I'm going to be generous. But one of the takeaways from the story is, if you can look at the resurrection of Jesus and go, yeah, that's not going to change like my financial situation. Like that's not going to change what I do with my stuff, like practically. Then Jesus is like, I don't know anything that's going to motivate you. And we go, no, this has to happen and this has to happen. And it's the same thinking as this rich man here. This self-deception causes us to live just like this rich man. So you and I end up putting off what we know we should do. We put it off till later because we have time. We'll get around to it. We'll take care of that when, rather than acknowledging, no, we just have this moment right now. That's all we have. And are we able to acknowledge that? Are we able to embrace that? Now, psychologically, there is a pain that we feel whenever we pay for something, whenever we deal with something in the moment, right? There's a pain associated with that, and you can study this. In fact, an author named Dan Ariely said this: studies using neuroimaging and MRIs have shown, this is fascinating, that paying indeed simulates the same brain regions that are involved in processing physical pain. When you pay for an item, what he's saying is, it is the same dynamics in your body as if you physically felt pain. They can connect those. High prices stimulate those brain mechanisms with higher intensity, but it's not just high prices that cause pain. Any price does. There is a pain we all feel when we give up something. This is fascinating. Psychologically, if you pay for something, if you give something, there is a pain with that is just as similar in your body to physical pain. And then we have to think about this. We don't spend much time on this, but this shapes a lot of how we go about making decisions that we do. Now, if you think about, if you're going to buy something, there are 3 different ways that you can buy it. There are 3 times when you can buy it. Let me illustrate this. You could say, I'm going to pay for something before I enjoy it. I'm going to pay for something while I enjoy it. Or I'm going to pay for something after I enjoy it. Okay? Now, if you imagine a vacation, you're going to take a vacation. How would this play out? Well, before you enjoy it, vacation would be like an all-inclusive trip where you have front-loaded it, you've paid in advance, you've covered, whatever you're going to need for that trip, you've already bought it. So then you go on the trip and it's all included, right? Now, it doesn't mean it's free. It means you've already paid for it. So imagine if you've ever had an all-inclusive trip or experience like that, that is paying for something before you enjoy it. If you pay for something while you enjoy it, that would be a vacation where you just go, hey, as we decide what we're going to do, we're just going to pay as we go, right? So we'll get the hotel room the night of, we'll pay for it. Or we'll get the meals as we go, we'll pay for them, right? That's what that feels like, is to pay as you go. The third option would be, hey, we're just going to put everything on a credit card, or we're going to have them charge a tab, put it to my hotel room, right? That's the pay after you enjoy. Like, I'll get around to that. I know that's coming, but I'm going to delay it as long as I can so I don't have to experience it. Here's what I want you to realize, okay? You can have your take on whichever one of those you think is the right one. But when you pay for something, shapes your experience of it. So whichever one you choose will shape. Here's what I want to argue. If you prepay for something, you enjoy it more. It's my hot take, okay? If you prepay for something, you enjoy it more. Now let me illustrate this, a couple examples. Imagine you have tickets to your favorite concert, okay? So whoever you would love to see the most, imagine you get front row seats to that. Now imagine, rather than buying a ticket, you have to pay after every song. What would that be like? All right, let's go. Song number one. Everyone's, oh, that was incredible. All right, get your credit cards out. Everyone's got to pay. If the musician's not performing, song two, till everyone is paid up. You go around, okay, put on my tab. I mean, at some point, you get in that show, you're like, this is adding up. Like, this is getting expensive. And then the encore comes out, and you're like, oh, I don't know. This is going to get tight. Maybe I got to bail. Like, it would totally change the feeling of the concert if you had to pay after every song, right? You go, I don't want to do that. Or imagine you were reading a book, and the book is free. You just pay after every chapter. How far would you get into books, right? Like, you'd read chapter 1, you're like, that was okay. I'll pay for chapter 2. Yeah, and you keep going. At some point, you're like, this isn't good enough. I suspect a lot of us would read even less than we read right now, because that would totally change the experience if you paid as you went. What I have found is that prepaying for something allows me to set it up in advance and then to enjoy it in the moment. Why do I say all of this? Here's the point. Does generosity happen best in advance, during, or after? If we want to be generous people, and that's the point of all three of these stories we've looked at in this series, how do we become the type of person Jesus is inviting us to become? Does it happen best in advance, during, or after? I think generosity works exactly the same way. But most of us practice generosity the way we use a credit card. I'll eventually pay that. I'll eventually get around to that. Charge it now. Yeah, let's have the fun now. And yeah, when that bill comes due, I'll pay as much of it as I can. I'll get around to as much of it as I can. And we kind of often do that. We often say things like, I'll be generous after I have more to give. Notice the timing of that generosity. You've delayed it all the way to the end. Yeah, if it works out, then I will be a generous person. And what that means is you have delayed the pain of paying, of giving that up. You have pushed that off as far as you can. And what I would say, friends, that's what the rich man has done. Lived his whole life enjoying every moment, never getting around to the pain of actually being generous with the people around him. And in this story, he still can't see it. He still can't realize he's so delusional. Now, I think the best vacations that I've ever had are the ones I prepaid on, the ones I was able to enjoy the most. And I have found in my own life, generosity works exactly the same way. When I decide up front to be generous, when I make the decision up front, this is how I want to be generous. This is the kind of generosity I want to experience in my life. I then start with that and then work everything else around that. And it has allowed us to be far more generous regardless of what we're going through, regardless of the situation. So I want to close today by just giving you a very practical challenge. And if you're looking at these stories, you're like, yeah, I don't want to miss it. I don't want to be that guy in this story that's just clueless to what's going on. Here's a really simple challenge. A challenge for anyone who wants to be more generous. Begin automated recurring giving. This is one of the easiest ways that I know to become more generous. And if you've been around here this month, you've heard Chris talk about this numerous times. Automated recurring giving is basically you decide in advance, right? Not during, not after, you decide in advance. This is the generosity I want to experience. This is how I want to be as a person. I want this kind of generosity in my life. Then you set it up in advance. And with technology, friends, this is so easy. You can do this every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every month, every two. I mean, you can set up however you want, and you say, hey, this amount is what I want to automatically come up out of my checking account into this, I'm going to give it to the church, and it's just going to set it up. And you can decide that in advance. And then you don't have to go, hey, do I feel like being generous today? Right? Here's what I have found. In my life, I automate the things that matter to me. So I want to have savings. Guess what? I automate my savings. I have money every month taken out of my checking account that goes into a savings account. Why? Because I don't want to wait until I feel like saving. I don't want to go, hey, am I feeling extra, planning ahead this month? Like, I really want to. No, I don't want to rely on that. I want to save money. So I just automate that. I automate the bills in my life. Why? Because I want to pay my bills every month. I don't want to be like, oh, did I even remember to do that? I don't want to hassle. I want to pay my bills, so I automate it, right? Anything that is of value, you can decide in advance to make a value. And yet with generosity, what I have found is we delay it. Why? Because there's a pain associated with it. Oh, if I have to keep giving. But just like you would not want to attend a concert that you had to pay after every song, you will not like being generous if you just try to keep doing it as you go, as you go, as you go. You're going to constantly feel that rather than saying, I'm going to decide up front. I want to be generous, and I'm going to figure out how to make it work. I want to close with this quote, and I love this idea. Alan Watts said, "You're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." I love this idea. Whoever you came in as today, you don't have to walk out that person. You may come in today, I'm not a generous person. I don't do this. I don't do that. Okay. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be when you walk out of here today? What kind of a person do you want to be? You know the saddest part of the story that Jesus told today is that at no point does the rich man ever get it. At no point does he go, okay, so like I missed it here. Like Lazarus is the one that is now, okay, I get it. Hey, how can I serve Lazarus? I mean, at no point is there a transformation. Think about the story of Christmas Carol, because when I read this story, I think about Scrooge. Like there's, some similarities there. But imagine if in a Christmas Carol, Scrooge never changed. That would be a horrible story. If the story ends and Scrooge is, going to his deathbed as a miserly old man, you go, well, that's an awful story, right? Why? Because we want to see change. That's the sadness of this story that Jesus tells. The rich man never changes, but you and I are under no obligation to the same people we were 5 minutes ago. And this is the beauty of each moment with Jesus. You go, hey, who are you inviting me to be, Jesus? What's the best version of me look like? And you get to decide that in advance. And friends, I want to encourage you. Generosity will bring out the best parts of you. It will bring out the parts you go, I want more of that version of me. I want more of that part of me. And you can decide in advance to be that kind of person, and you can experience the kind of life that Jesus is inviting us to experience. Let's pray together. Jesus, as we look at these two different men in this story, one who just had it all, had everything, got to live a life of luxury, and yet was so delusional in the process. And another person who suffered, who didn't have all that. And yet in your story, the roles get reversed after death. And we realize that the rich man still couldn't see. So God, we pray that you would give us the ability to see reality. Not to define our worth in the stuff that we have, because that stuff will blind us to the people around us. But to ultimately see who we are through your eyes and have the ability to see the people around us, the suffering around us. And God, as we learn about the pain of paying for things and how there's often a feeling associated with that, may we decide that we're going to be generous in advance. We're not going to leave it up to chance. We're not going to leave it up to our willpower. But we can commit right now, that's the kind of person we want to be. We want to be a generous person. And if we're willing to take that step with you, I pray you just give us the courage to take that first step, make that first move, and begin to trust you in this way. And we invite you to bring out the best versions of us as we become more generous people. As we learn to listen and see the suffering around us, the needs around us. God, we pray that you'd use people like us, flawed, broken people like us, to bring healing and encouragement and love to the needs of the world around us. Would you use us in this way, we pray. And all God's people said, amen.
During this time of communion, we stop and remember the generosity that was displayed by God himself and what he did for us by sending his son to die for us on the cross. And with that generosity came great pain. changed the world. This generosity changed my world. And I believe for those of you that call yourselves followers of Jesus, his generosity changed your world too. This is the time where we stop and we thank him for that. We just say, thank you for dying for me. Thank you for seeing me and loving me and knowing that there was a wall between me and you. And thank you for destroying that wall with your blood. Now, the blood of Christ just brought the wall down between the wall of sin that exists between us and the Creator. There's no wall. There's no wall at all. You and I have access to the Creator, God himself, on a regular basis because of what God the Son did on the cross and through the grave. This is what we remember right now. So just a moment, I'm going to invite you, go get your communion packets. They're by the doors when you walk in. The little wafer symbolic of his body broken, the juice is symbolic of his blood shed. Come back to your seat, and this is my challenge to you. Don't just swig it. Don't make it be a holy shot, okay? Process. Pray. Maybe you're not a prayer warrior person. You're, Chris, I don't pray very much. Maybe you practice that now. Just try it. Thank him. Thank him specifically for his generosity, his sacrifice, his love. Just thank him. Ask him to just overwhelm you again with that sense of love that he's trying to display for you and I on that cross. Just be loved by him. Ask him just to love you and encourage you in that moment. So you don't need to stand and worship in the song. You can just worship the Lord by sitting and just praying and talking to him too. Whatever works for you, or on your knees. Just enjoy these minutes with the Lord because of how busy our week is. Just enjoy these minutes, all right? If you need some prayer, I'll have a friend over there that'd be open to pray